Somewhere in Austin, Texas, right now, a car with no steering wheel is picking up a passenger. No driver, no safety monitor, nobody in the front seat at all. And that passenger, they're paying about half of what they would for an Uber. This is not a test. This is Tuesday. And look, when most investors hear that, their mind immediately jumps to one place: Tesla. Elon Musk, FSD, the cybercab. But here's the thing, there are actually three completely different bets being placed on the future of autonomous driving, all happening at the same time. And the company most people are ignoring might have already built an insurmountable lead. By the end of this explainer, you are going to understand this true three-way battle, why Tesla's biggest risk has nothing to do with its technology, who is quietly collecting money from all sides, and what it all means for where you position yourself right now. So the entire future of autonomous mobility. It's not one single race. It's really a clash between three totally different philosophies. You can think of it as a cowboy, an engineer, and a toll booth operator, all trying to build the next trillion-dollar industry from the ground up. And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be higher. The market is projected to explode from just under $5 billion today to almost $700 billion by 2033. That's a compound annual growth rate of 86%. 86%. This isn't some distant sci-fi future we're talking about. The ramp is happening right now. NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, he calls this the ChatGPT moment for physical AI. And what he means by that is, this is the point where artificial intelligence leaps off the screen and starts moving around in the real world at commercial scale. And the date everyone is circling on their calendar? 2026. This year is the inflection point. So let's meet the players on the field. First, you've got Tesla, the cowboy, making this radical, all-in bet on a single vision of the future. Then you've got Waymo, the obsessive engineer, taking the safety-first approach that absolutely refuses to compromise. And finally, you have the toll booth operators, companies like Uber and NVIDIA, who are just building the roads and selling the tools, making money no matter which of the first two wins the race.
To really understand this war, you have to understand the economics. It all comes down to the cost per mile. Right now, a regular Uber or Lyft costs about $1.71 per mile. A Waymo ride? Already cheaper at $1.43. But then there's Tesla. They're already operating at just 81 cents per mile, and their long-term goal with the cybercab is to push that number all the way down to 30 cents. That cost advantage is the entire game. So let's start with the cowboys, and let's start with the part of their story that almost nobody wants to talk about.
Okay, and I want to be really clear about something up front. Tesla's vision-only approach, it might ultimately be right. It is a brilliant, audacious bet on the power of pure AI. But right now, today, there is a documented body of evidence that it has real, serious failure modes, and any investor in this space needs to understand exactly what those are. When you dig into the data from the NHTSA and the Wall Street Journal, you see 5 structural weaknesses pop up again and again. The first is the most important: no redundant sensors. By using only cameras, it's like trying to drive a car with only your eyes. You have no way to feel the grip on the road, hear an approaching ambulance, or sense a sudden crosswind. The system is also blind to black swan events it hasn't seen in its training data. Think about a truck that is overturned on the highway. Its cameras can fail to calibrate. They can get blinded by sun glare or heavy rain. And maybe the most dangerous part? It creates overtrust in the human drivers, who are supposed to be supervising, and they just stop paying attention.
Now, to its credit, Tesla has a direct engineering answer to these problems. It's called Hardware 4, and it's a fascinating shift in philosophy. They've boosted the compute power, they've massively upgraded the camera resolution from 1.2 megapixels to 5, and crucially, they brought back radar. That Phoenix radar system is a direct admission that the vision-only approach has limits. It gives the car a second way of seeing the world, especially when visibility is low.
But that fix creates a massive new problem. What about the millions of cars already on the road that were sold on the promise of full self-driving? Well, Elon Musk himself admitted that going back and retrofitting those cars with the new hardware would be, in his words, painful and difficult. This creates a huge legacy fleet issue that, frankly, the market has not fully priced into the stock. Okay, so if Tesla is the cowboy, let's switch gears and talk about the obsessive engineer. Waymo's entire philosophy is the polar opposite of Tesla's. It's built on a foundation of overwhelming data and, you guessed it, uncompromising redundancy. And that foundation is just massive. By early 2026, Waymo had driven over 200 million miles completely autonomously. That's rider only, nobody in the front seat. To put that in perspective, That is a dataset of real-world experience that no competitor on Earth can even come close to matching right now. It's a true data moat. And this is where their advantage really starts to compound. Working with Google's DeepMind, they've built something called a world model. Now, this isn't just a simulator. They call it a generative reality machine. They can take one close call from the real world and instantly create thousands of photorealistic variations of it in simulation to train their AI. They can test for bizarre edge cases like what happens if it snows under the Golden Gate Bridge without ever having to drive there. They're actively creating safety data, not just passively collecting it.
For years, the big knock on Waymo was cost. Everyone knew the tech was amazing, but the hardware was just too expensive to scale. But then they had a breakthrough, slashing their hardware costs by more than half, down to under $20,000 per vehicle. And just like that, the single biggest commercial argument against Waymo, it's off the table.
But here's the thing. Even the most obsessive engineer with the most advanced technology eventually has to meet the messy, unpredictable real world. And this is where the perfect theory of autonomous driving runs into some very human and sometimes pretty funny problems.
It raises a question you would literally never think to ask. What happens when a passenger gets out and doesn't quite shut the car door all the way? Suddenly, the world's most sophisticated AI is paralyzed by a simple problem it just can't solve.
And the solution? You're not going to believe this. Waymo's system would actually ping the gig economy. It would send an alert to a nearby DoorDash worker, offering them up to $11.25 to just come over and push the door shut. It's the perfect picture of high-tech theory meeting low-tech real-world friction.
But some of the real-world problems are a lot less funny and a lot more systemic. For instance, what happens when the city's own infrastructure fails?
Well, we found out. During a citywide power outage in San Francisco in late 2025, all the traffic lights went dark. And Waymo's cars, unable to process the chaotic, human-directed intersections, and with their remote operators totally overwhelmed, simply stopped. They froze, right in the middle of interceptions, causing total gridlock. It exposed a critical dependency on city infrastructure, a vulnerability that their competitor, Tesla, which still had safety monitors in the cars, just didn't have. And all of this brings us to the third character in our story. Because here's the thing. The real winner in this massive war might not be the company building the best car at all. It might be the one who owns the platform that all the cars have to run on. Just take a look at how Waymo is launching in new cities like Atlanta. They aren't even using their own app. You, the customer, open the Uber app. You request a normal ride, and you might get matched with a Waymo vehicle. Everything from unlocking the doors to payment to customer support happens inside the Uber app. From Uber's perspective, this move is brilliant. They've just turned Waymo from a competitor into a simple hardware supplier for their network. Uber still owns the customer relationship. And then, of course, there's the ultimate toll booth, NVIDIA. They are the true arms dealers in this war. They're selling the picks and shovels to everyone. They power the massive AI training models in the data center where these systems are built. Then they sell the specialized chips that run the AI inference inside the cars themselves. Their Drive Thor and Albemarle platforms are the industry standard. So whether it's Tesla or Waymo or Mercedes or Ford, they all have to pay the NVIDIA toll. So, after all of that, how do you take this incredibly complex landscape and turn it into a clear framework for an investor? How do you decide where to position yourself right now? Let's break it down really simply. A bet on Tesla is a bet on a vertically integrated AI and robotics company. The risk is that their vision-only approach hits a regulatory wall they can't get past. A bet on Waymo is a bet on a safety-first, data-driven moat. The risk is their dependency on platforms like Uber and the fragility of city infrastructure. With Uber, you're betting they'll own the customer distribution layer, but the risk is they just become a low-margin aggregator of other people's tech. And with NVIDIA, you're betting on the underlying compute layer for the entire industry. It's the safest bet on the trend, but that safety and optimism, it's already reflected in its very high valuation. Markets reward the people who do the work before the crowd shows up. You just did the work. See you in the next one.